I'm recording now.
All right,
Uh,
let's see.
there are participants here. Hold on, let me see.
I see Reginald is in here as an attendee. I wonder if we can move him into being a
So,
presenter. Oh, there he is.
and then there's a member of the public here. Let's
Hmm.
put them on.
Hi, I'm still trying to am I actually in the thing here? Because I am not able to be seen.
You know,
Yeah, I think that you have a separate link in the calendar invite, Reginald. Did you try
Okay.
clicking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and do that. So give me one,
Okay.
give me a minute.
And then I think we move attendees into the attendees section until it's time for public comment. Let me see. Yeah, I think it looks like we can do it either way. We can have them here, or I think that there were, I think the more recent update to the rules specify that towards the end is when we can do public comment and move people in, but we can do it either way. Do you have mute and unmute privileges, Chris?
no, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what to do right now. So I can do ask to unmute. Let me see if I can do that. I think Kathleen, are you on mute there?
I just unmuted.
Okay, what I can't figure out is what is your video off or is that automatic?
Well, my video is off.
Okay, okay.
Because for a webinar, I don't think my video is on, so.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I just didn't, so I can't, we're trying to get Mr. Garth on,
Yeah,
and I don't know if he's there. Let's see, hold on. Let's see. And then Jerry Connolly's here. But I don't know. I think Reginald Garth is not, Commissioner Garth isn't working. I don't know if he can use his other link or what's the best way to do that.
Yeah, I think that he tried to log in using the general public link, and as panelists, we get the separate links that they send out in our calendar invite, so that we can log in to the Zoom as panelists. So I think he's going to try to do it that way. So he might appear twice if he does it correctly. And I'm gonna drop him a message and see if he's having any issues locating that link.
That came up automatically on my calendar,
Yeah,
the link.
mine too. Yeah.
Okay. So Kathleen, I'm gonna mute you, okay?
that's fine.
Okay. And then I don't know, let's see, do you want to talk? No, okay. Oh, and there's Dwight, there's Commissioner Dwight, okay.
Hi, David.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, let's see. So Reginald logged off, so that's encouraging. Let's see. Sending him a quick message. David, Reginald was having some issues. He had originally logged in as an attendee instead of a panelist, so we're trying to get him to do the correct link to formally be a panelist.
Awesome.
Here
There
he
he
is.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, we were just discussing whether we want to do some public comment first or wait till the end, but
Given the nature of our work group, I mean, we can, part of me just wants to go ahead and just get it out of the way, and then we move on to the work that we need to do.
okay.
Could be
Um,
insightful to hear from folks up front.
Yes.
I think also would be a
Yeah.
respectful thing just because we don't know, who's got time commitments tonight. And I know the last time we met, we went a little bit over our time. And I think that we originally bookmarked from 6 to 7. So I think it could be helpful to hear from the folks who are on here first about topics they're interested in related to the articles of our working group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that it's custom to provide a certain amount of like rough time frame for people to speak, to be able to share their thoughts to ensure equitable
Sure.
participation. So do we want to do maybe 5 minutes per speaker? Does that seem
Yeah, if
okay?
that's kind of exactly what I
Yeah.
was thinking.
Oh,
Up
good.
to 5 minutes. We have two people on if they want to talk, 5 minutes each.
I'll set my timer for that.
That sounds good to me.
Well, it looks like Kathleen Farrell has unmuted first. So Kathleen, it seems you're quickest to the draw. So would you like to share any thoughts with this working group?
Sure. Kathleen Farrell, League of Women Voters. We're just hopeful that we start to see some exploration of some real structural changes in the charter. That would include the surveys that we've done and the public sort of question and answer we've had. People are interested in such changes as changes to the Board of Estimates, the serious consideration of a city manager, the exploration of what looks to us to be some serious duplication of the financial offices. That would be the treasurer, the comptroller, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to say that I think when we've talked to folks, they really want those structural changes explored. They're also interested in how much you're working with the model charter project. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you,
Does
Kathleen.
anyone have any questions for Kathleen?
Yeah, I guess I do. So first of all, Kathleen, thank you so much first and foremost for making time to attend this evening. We know that there are a lot of other things people could be spending their evenings on. And yeah, I would love to learn a little bit more about, you mentioned that there's a survey that you guys do or some sort of an outreach. I would love to learn more about what that looks like. How long you guys been doing that? What are the questions that you guys ask? Where do you gather? Just would love to learn a little bit more about that.
That's
Okay.
fine.
We have had a number of meetings in the League of Women Voters with the public meetings about this. We are going to have 2 serious meetings on the 2nd and the 9th of December through SLACO. So these are considerations primarily at this point that our members have done in terms of some research, and then by questioning their friends and neighbors and neighborhood associations about it. I think when we get to that December set of meetings with neighborhood associations, we're going to have a more formal survey.
That's helpful.
Yeah, and thank you so much for to you and all the members of League of Women Voters. Big fan of the group, and just thank you guys for just getting the public engaged and educated on this effort. That's really great.
Can you, Kathleen, give us a 2-cent summary of what you mean about structural changes to, for instance, the Board of Estimate or duplication of financial offices, which kind of fall in the wheelhouse of this work group?
Yeah, I think that what we're thinking about is that the comptroller has a tremendous amount of power, and we want that to compare that to other cities that are like us. And the duplication we see with the comptroller and then the budgeting process, the treasurer's office, which is complicated, I understand that. And I don't have my notes in front of me, so I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I'd be happy to send you a note with those things in it. People were really, really interested at the top of the list on the consideration of a city manager. And the arguments there, and again, we're going to have a more formal process with the neighborhood groups in December to, a city manager, which many people think should be explored seriously to get departments to be more effective, rather than have the power and restrictions in the mayor's office. I add one more thing, and I don't think it's in your wheel tonight, but the relationship between the personnel department and the civil service board. We're trying to understand all of that. So we're also concerned about the lack of a centralized IT system. We have observed that different departments have their own computer systems, and those aren't always the same. So that's what I can say right off the top. I wasn't really prepared for this, but I think that gives you a sense.
Okay. Well, how about, that's about 5 minutes, so unless someone else has another question, maybe Mr.
Just-
Conley, oh, Dwight, go ahead.
Just that you mentioned the Model City program nationally, and that is something that all of the commissioners have received. Actually, I have my copy here. So it is part of kind of the materials that have been given to all the commissioners.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I know that Webster Groves has just gone through this process and they used it heavily.
Okay, what about Mr. Conley?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Question, clarification. Is this the second meeting of this working group?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I do not believe the first meeting was noticed on the city's meeting calendar.
That is correct.
Okay. Are there minutes? I'm not looking at the agenda currently. Are there minutes from that meeting going to be generated?
So
No, well, I'm not aware of that, but so there was some question about whether the work group, since they constituted less of a quorum, was really information gathering, that official business wasn't essentially being conducted in the formulation of policy, whether to notice them as open. I think we've decided to just go ahead and do that to be to get as much public input as possible.
Okay.
So but yeah, the first meeting, I mean, we could recap it for you, but I'm not aware.
No, that's all right. That's
Okay.
all right.
I will
Okay,
say just real quickly that I received only this morning in my email the links and the announcement of these working group meetings. I didn't get it till this morning, and I think that's a little late.
We can check with the city councilor's office on their process on that, but I know that they did meet notice requirements by posting this on official city calendars. I don't quite know when the automated email is sent
Okay.
out, if it's like the morning of. I can share too that I also got an email in my inbox as a commissioner this morning reminding me that it was this morning. So it could just be that there's something built into the system that once you've expressed interest or, yeah.
I kept
but no-
looking. I kept looking on the calendar and I didn't see it. So anyway,
Okay.
just an aside, and now I will be quiet.
Yeah, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so maybe I will just briefly recap. We spent really the first meeting just we've been assigned all these articles essentially for a work group, and we spent the first meeting just looking at the article in the charter on the Board of Public Service and just sort of trying to understand all the aspects of it. And I think we pretty much have completed our sort of review of that article, and we were gonna move on to the next articles. Is that the plan?
That was the general plan. I know that we definitely we really delved mostly into Board of Public Safety or public service, as it were. So that's what we really delved in the last meeting. So I guess we're moving on to the next portion here.
Yeah, I
And then I
believe it's
think
the Art Museum and Zoological Park. Is that, yeah.
Which is 2 sentences long.
And then one other thing that we talked about and would be good to wrap around today is, since in the current schedule, we're the first up to deliver recommendations, I think we wanted to talk
Mhm.
today about some proposed changes to the calendar, and then also
Yes, absolutely.
that we might have some priority directors, department heads, etc., to
Mhm.
come to the larger public meetings.
Yeah, and I would say, to recap on the schedule conversation for Kathleen and Jerry, is we really quickly realized when diving into the articles that working groups in general, especially ours, are probably going to need a little bit more time than the structure that was initially laid out by the full commission. So at the forthcoming full meeting next week, we do plan to make a presentation during our report on the work that our subcommittee working group has done so far. Because we're the first group that's really diving in, because we're the first group that's really slated to present, we think that could be helpful to other working groups to share the experience that we've had so far with how long some of the conversations can take, and some of the follow-up questions and research. And we really wanted to be intentional about making sure that there was time in the coming months for there to be more of like a public forum as part of our working group as well, which is of course going to need a little bit more time, a little bit more meetings, and is strictly built into the current structure. So we plan to discuss that maybe a little bit more tonight, and then with the goal of bringing forward that recommendation to the meeting next week. So yeah, that's the big picture with that.
Okay, so we got 45 minutes. Should we?
Well,
Let's go.
so in this 45 minutes or so, this kind of leads right into the Department of Finance.
Okay.
So this is Article 15. And I know that we had a public comment that addressed the roles of the comptroller and the role of, well, treasurer is all the way under section 24. There's quite a lot of sections to this article. And says here that we have the Department of Finance shall include the Office of Comptroller and Assessment, Collection, Treasury, and Supply divisions. So that's the whole thing there with the Department of Finance. So let's take a look at that and kind of delve into what needs to, of course, be amended to 21st century language.
I really think, one of the common themes from last week's conversation was, flagging how much we, really identifying those priority speakers to really speak to the departments that are like the really involved ones and the heavy hitters, and what's working and what's not working. And it seems like there's a lot of interest in this particular department. So I think that we might consider making this one of the flags of, those asks is, asking for maybe some more information about from the comptroller about what do you see your modern role, what are your biggest challenges, how do you work with these different, the various different city divisions, what are areas of overlap, what doesn't really make sense to come under you. Yeah, I think that we've pretty consistently since the start of the Charter Commission heard a lot of interest in understanding more about what the comptroller's role is as it relates to other divisions.
Yeah, agreed on that. And I think it does get, which is something that was in the public comment, but I think is also an area of interest of a variety of members is around the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and the budget process and all those, which is the article that's right after this. But
Mhm.
one question that I had is, if I understand right, the treasurer is a county office, different
Yes.
from the city office of
Mhm.
controller, which is an they're both elected, but
Mhm.
they sit under different structures.
Of so that there's full disclosure here, being that I work within office of the treasurer. The treasurer's office is a county office, so the treasurer's office is essentially governed under the Missouri the state constitution, whereas the comptroller falls more or less under the purview of the city charter. So when we talk about things such as like those county offices, we have to be very careful because again, those offices are essentially under the the Missouri Constitution, which of course we cannot touch that.
And there's also a whole host of different statutes at the state level too that come into play. That's a good flag.
So I do believe the Missouri Constitution gives us some ability to alter or modify these county offices, although I don't know the extent of that. But what I would like to know, because I do agree with what David said, there is a lot of, I think, public interest in understanding the comptroller's office, because it's a position that's rather unique to St. Louis in the sense that it's someone who has almost policy-making powers through the Board of E&A, and is not really accountable to the mayors, not under the mayor's office, but operates independently. And I think there's been a lot of interest, and I'd like to know like whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? And how do we gather that information?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like I said, I think that it starts with getting, I mean, at least from my perspective, at least, I don't want to speak for the group, but getting I think more of that understanding of like what has the role, like as we see in the charter, the charter says one thing about the role of so many different departments and divisions. And then in reality and in practice, it's for many departments a completely different thing. And I think that what could be really informative to like maybe get to the point of being able to more fully and better assess is just asking for, the rundown of what is it that you all handle and how is that different, than, the treasurer's office, and how is that different than this other entity, and really, making sure that that's something that's able to get out there in the public so people have a chance to listen and on their own and, think it over and share their thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that as like a starting point. And I think it could be a question when we talk to some of the first article in our group, the Board of Public Service heads, the various department heads, to ask them about how the budgeting process works for them or doesn't work, where there are breakdowns. I'm sure there'll be something in relationship. Something that's brought up is the difficulty with our Board of Alders not really having any line edit power when it comes to the budget process, and that being kind of out of the norm with our E&A structure. So it could be good to ask that be one of the things on the list for the Board of Public Service members, to just hear about the budget process.
So and David, so what the budgeting process right now, I have some familiarity with the authority of or I guess the lack of authority of the board. But do you have an understanding, like how do we go from nothing on paper to something on paper, as far as a budget?
I
Yeah,
can,
the whole diagram that the city has, obviously, I've gone through it from a outside of government advocate standpoint, but Casey would know more about from the internal. But there is a diagram of the process that exists.
sure, and I can speak a little bit to the functionality of how that works from my experience so far. I've only been through one appropriation cycle in the city, so I can only speak to that experience. But typically, the conversations begin in maybe like January or February with, budget division, meeting with the different departments to understand what are your staffing needs, what are programmatic needs, what is it that you're hoping to maybe build upon and do differently and expand upon in the coming fiscal year? What does that take in terms of the number and like cost of, personal service is what the technical term, but it basically means employees, right? What equipment would you need? Things like that. And then, so yeah, budget division really starts meeting with departments, mayor's office, because we're executive branch, obviously, we're in touch with departments and, working with them through the process to help them flesh out their ideas. And so they, have the meetings with the budget division, and then budget division, while this is going on, is also formulating a better sense of what are some of the long-term fiscal trends like for the forthcoming fiscal year that we need to be mindful of that will help shape the budget, not just with the general fund, but with all of the different funds that the city is funded through. And so usually around mid-March is when there's like another round of like more intensive budget meetings with, the budget division with departments, in which it's really like drilling down in terms of saying, okay, well, we have a better sense of what we think might happen. The reason it happens in March is because traditionally the budget division makes the presentation on the proposed budget to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. And really the budget division does have a lot of leeway. Oh, thank you so much, David. There it is. I was casually trying to search for it while talking, and that was not going well. Thank you.
I was able to search back through. We used to do trainings for community members about part of
Oh,
this.
nice. Yeah, and so usually in March is when like there's those drill down conversations when the budget division has a better idea of what the fiscal picture is, and they do have a lot of leeway to recommend, okay, yes, this project, or no, this new item, or it sounds like we need to, remove, this from the budget or tweak your budget in this way. And so in April is all that leads up to April, and that's when the budget division prepares the proposed budget. They submit it to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which, in case folks are watching, they seem very well informed, but in case this is also being recorded, Board of Estimate and Apportionment is the comptroller, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and then the mayor. And so there's a presentation to them. They ask questions. They review the proposed budgets. They bring in any departments for hearings and to ask for their drill down questions. A lot of times they'll make amendments or slight tweaks to the budget, when it's being considered at the Board of E&A level. And then once they vote it out, they send it over to the Board of Aldermen. At the Board of Aldermen, it then goes to the Budget and Public Employees Committee, which does, this year they did a series of hearings with different departments. Usually there's a few departments that they bring in. Sometimes there will be something they really want to drill down into, and they'll bring a department back to really focus on that. It's obviously open to the public. The public can voice their thoughts on that. The public can share their suggestions. Right now in terms of the board, they're able to, they have my understanding is that their ability to impact the budget is they can try to reappropriate a line for a specific purpose, so long as it's also couched within the original purpose of the line. So a great example would be there was an American Rescue Plan Act bill at the start of this year, and there was a line for recreation centers, and two alders kind of parceled that out so that it was for two specific recreation centers. So things like that. And then this year, something that also happened with the Budget and Public Employees Committee is they sent a letter to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making a recommendation for a change that they would like to see made at the Board of Estimate and Apportionment to send back to them. in the annual operating budget before final passage. And the Board of Estimate and Apportionment did receive that, and then they agreed to that, and they sent it back, and then it moved on to the floor, and then it was passed and signed by the mayor. So that is the high level. I know there's some deadlines that I believe are set forth in the charter as well on the budget process. I believe that they have to submit, Board of ENA has to submit the budget to the board by May 1st, I believe. And then the fiscal year begins on July 1st. So that's like absolute drop dead deadline, but May 1st is really key deadline for the Board of ENA.
Two things out of that. First, in here, do we have a different fiscal year than is in the charter? In section 8 of Article 16, around fiscal year, it names it as the second Tuesday in April of each year. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that needs to be updated to what our actual budget practice is. And then I guess every year when the budget process comes around, I've heard of dysfunction in it. And that might be vibes. And I'm not suggesting we change based off vibes, but it is an area that I'm interested in receiving comment from both government employees and
It's a fun process, Dave. It's a very, very fun process. And by fun,
and I guess the vibe that I've also often heard or experienced is that perhaps the way that it functions with our addition of a ENA structure, as well as the mayor, the comptroller, and the board of alders, and some of the particular ways that the powers are aligned is like, and it's great to have checks and balances, but that perhaps it goes to a hyper level that actually causes dysfunction in the process. It is what I've heard at times from some alders, some people in various parts of it. So that's what I have an interest in learning more about.
that would actually be the absolute correct statement in what you said there. It is a very unique process with lots of checks and balances, and many of those checks and balances are pretty hyper. I mean, I'm just sitting here reading again over the comptroller and the treasurer, and just reading that alone just tells me, I mean, if you look back over the whole section 2 of Article 15, where it goes into a lot of the detail of what the comptroller is, and then you look at the section with the treasurer, which is section 24. I mean, section 24 is like maybe a paragraph, and the comptroller almost gets a whole page.
I mean, is the treasurer more of like a ministerial job?
That's basically, if as I'm reading it, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's my translation of the two. It's like sort of like, you know, Secretary of the Treasury and the head of the Federal Reserve, if that makes sense.
So like, I think a good way to think about this is an allegory with, I came from from working in state government. And the way I think about the difference between the two functions is, you know, the treasurer, you know, keeps the money, monitors the money, understands what's going on, signs the checks, you know, all of that. And the comptroller, really, the way when you look at our charter, serves more of a function that like the state auditor's office might. Like there's a little bit of crossover with, you know, the state treasurer's office has some of those duties and powers. But when you look at like the differentiation of like what the comptroller's office does, there's a little bit more of the like the, you know, the preemptive screening of before something is approved for disbursement, like the dotting of I's, the crossing of T's. Like they're not signing the checks, they're doing the due diligence. That seems, you know, in my reading and just general understanding of what I see them do, that seems to be one of the key areas of difference in terms of, the treasurer does serve a little bit more of the like the traditional role of what we think as a treasurer, like monitoring accounts, making sure money's being spent and safe, making sure the checks are signed, bills get paid on time. And the comptroller is there doing like the due diligence, both in the front and on the back end as well, is how I see the differences between the two.
And the comptrollers, since she's on the board of E&A, she's involved in actually setting amounts of money that will or will not be spent, right? So there's a policy function there as well.
Yes.
So could you tell us, Casey? So, I mean, I see in the charter or anyone else, I see in the charter, so the board of alder persons can't, they can only reduce items, right? They can't increase, right? So what are these negotiations that are happening? And I mean, like, if the board of aldermen feel like as a matter of policy, the Department of Streets should be doing more work and get more money, how does that happen?
Sure. So one thing I mentioned is this year certainly my first budget cycle, so I don't know if it's operated differently in the past, full caveat on that, but we did do joint, we had our own, visits with departments, but then we also later on did joint learning sessions, listening sessions with departments in the budget divisions and with the president's office as well. So they're also given the opportunity to sit and listen with departments, ask questions, advocate for those things that they would want to see in the budget. I do know, I'm not privy to those meetings, but I do know the president's office does meet regularly with the budget director during this time period, just as the mayor's office does. So they're afforded the same, access, on the board side, well, at least on the president's side, to trying to understand, okay, what's going on with this program? And can you tell me a little bit more how this works? And explain to me my funding was different from this year to this year, or something wasn't expended, or this was, more money was expended on this. And then we also did those more intensive, really drill down, like second round of budget hearings that I mentioned earlier, with the budget division. Those were, jointly held between the president's office and the mayor's office as well. So they're engaged as well on that. I would want to let their office speak to how they incorporate board members' feedback on that. I'm not sure that I can speak to that, if there's, how they would approach internally talking about, okay, well, the board president has a seat on E&A. How do they get a consensus or figure out what to advocate for on behalf of their alders? That's not something that I'm able to speak to, but I'm sure that Commissioner Ingrassia might be able to shed some insight on that, because I know that she was their office's staff liaison basically for the budget process this year.
I've heard of that being a breakdown spot in the past. Not specifically like with this administration. I'm talking about like across time, that the way that it doesn't, like that's not how Congress works, right? In terms of the role of a legislature in helping to inform a budget. And so I'd love for us to consider like other approaches or ways.
Casey, who could we perhaps meet with from the comptroller's office as a liaison or what have you? I know kind of like how, you're representing, of course, the mayor's office, and of course, Miss Ingrassia is with, of course, representing the Board of Aldermen's office, but I know that the comptroller is invited to our general meetings, but we have not seen her or have had anyone from her office to represent her as a proxy or what have you. So is there any way that we could maybe have someone from that office to kind of give us more insight, and that can meet with us and kind of discuss those matters that we're talking about right here?
So I think that's probably best referred to the Charter Commission staff to reach out to them and make that request, since we don't supervise the
Of
comptroller's
course.
office. I'm not sure that there's a way that we could like directly influence that. But I'm sure that if the request was made to the Charter Commission staff saying, hey, we have a lot of questions about how this works from your guys' perspective. Here are the specific, topics that we're looking to drill into. I'm sure sending that to, I'm trying to think who else. Probably, yeah, maybe probably city council staff. I know that they have a lot of connections in city government, so they might know who, in addition to Comptroller Green in that office, could be well positioned for that. And also occurs to me that we have a very capable city budget director who might be able to speak to the processes as well. Maybe a little bit more to how he balances the different conversations with board president and comptroller and mayor, and how that has worked and is maybe working differently based on what you're saying, David, historically. So he might be a good person to just hear from and understand what his process is as well.
So is that something we should bring up at the next full meeting next week? Like, we want this person's here, or should we be
I
doing that by
think
email right now?
that may be a good idea to do that. I think we should just to kind of bring that up and to see if that can be addressed, or at least make that ask is what I'm saying. Make the
I would
ask
like,
and see if that can be done.
I would like to do that at the full meeting, because
All right.
I think it brings more weight if we say, like, we
Mhm.
need to hear from these people, rather than us just sending emails out, right? So,
Of course.
And
yeah.
I think the chairwoman's recent email indicated that the December meeting is what she's thinking about in terms of having departments present. I could be reading that wrong, but that was our understanding in terms of her thinking. I mean, obviously the agenda for next week is set and no department heads were on that, so we can't modify that at this point. But my understanding of the email she sent out this week was December is when we would look to starting to bring in some of those departments. So perhaps as part of what is on the agenda for next week is the report for our working group. So perhaps that can just be part of the report and saying, hey, like, these are the people who we would consider priority for our working group. Here's why, happy to coordinate with, commission staff and others on that. But yeah, I think December is the target date for those.
Wait, so we're not starting that in November, or?
I thought it's been a minute since I looked at the email, but by a minute, I mean since I think Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever it was sent, but I thought that was what was suggested just from like the whole charter commission, like the full charter commission. My understanding was the message of that email was the full charter commission would look to, at the next like full meeting in December, to start having some of the public testimony from, or public insight from, department officials. And then there's nothing precluding us, I think, per our conversation last week as a working group, from holding whatever conversations during meetings we would want to have in the interim. But the agenda for next week was sent out. It's mostly focused on working group reports and next steps.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jasmine's email now, and it's a little cryptic.
Monday.
What she's saying is
Mhm.
so, but she
Yes,
said
my-
based on they want these reports by the December public meeting, but I didn't understand. I don't. Does that mean actual people there, or just someone like sending us something in writing?
Well, yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I reached out to the Charter Commission staff just to get a little bit of clarity on that. And the response was, because as a commission, we really didn't designate one way or the other. It's sort of up to the departments to decide what version that report takes. And so, I know certainly in our office, we've been, working with departments to try and encourage that feedback and, really get them to start thinking about it. So I think that certainly there's interest and ability in doing an in-person report. Obviously, we need to give them some heads up notice so they can get on their schedules. But yeah, we didn't, as a commission, specifically identify the form of those reports. So I think there certainly is some interest in doing the in-person.
Well,
And I really think that connects to our timeline you know, requests from them. Because it sounds like that's one of the things we want to propose in our work group readout is that, hey, since we're the first ones up, these are some of the priorities that we see. And so it sounds like as part of, like maybe as part of that kind of proposal, we're saying both, it would be really important if we're going first to have some of those, to make an invitation for December, or maybe even to prioritize like some of that feedback for these set of articles. And then also the public forum sound like two things that would go under that part of our presentation.
Well, then maybe should we send, should we send an email to Jasmine and to the staff? They say, look, we really need to bring this up at the next meeting about how we're gonna get input from these 7 department heads in the Board of Public Service and the Comptroller's Office and anybody else. Cause we're starting to run out of time. So,
I think that we can definitely make that part of our scheduled report, right? I think that I think we're the first step, and I think that we can. I think that if I'm remembering the agenda that was sent out correctly, I think there's definitely room for us to bring that up along with the other topics that we mentioned.
okay, well, well, okay. Um. All right, well, we have about 15 more minutes. What should we? Should we move on to some other articles or?
I mean, honestly, I'd be a little bit. I hate to say it, but I'm a little apprehensive moving further because all we're gonna do is just continue to add more onto the list, and then it's like, well, we need to know. I don't want to delve too deep without us knowing, because really the big bulk of our work group is comptroller, or rather the Department of Finance and ENA. And I would really love to kind of, and of course, we have the what was that, public service. So I mean, we have 2 really big things there, and I would love to just kind of begin with that aspect first and really kind of delve into that. I just don't want us to try and, as they say, eat the whole elephant at once. Got to eat it a piece at a time. Given that I know that I know that we're on a time crunch. At the same time, I know that the timeline was merely a suggestion, and I think it would be prudent to get an extension on that timeline, because if we're talking about meeting with people in December, I want us to have something good and solid to present, not something that we just threw together just to meet a deadline in January, and then now we got to go back and, you see what I'm saying? It's kind of like we're working against ourselves, as opposed to just being clear and concise and making sure that we're polished. And here's what we have. Here's the information we received. Here's some of the suggestions that we have from that information that we've taken in.
So maybe to both of your points, that's how we use the last 13 minutes, really focused on what we'll be presenting at the next meeting and what our asks of the commission are.
Yes.
Yes. So far I have those asks as timeline changes, some requests around kind of like input from key government leaders. And as part of that, we both have a couple of questions about kind of when the reports come back, and then prioritizing some of our work groups leaders for the upcoming meetings, since the current schedule says we're first. Before kind of jumping into any of those particular, are there any other items that would be part of our kind of proposal to the group beyond timeline changes and then input? Oh, the public input.
Yes.
Is also maybe our last.
You mean like that David, that we should have a big work group public meeting?
Yeah, you were kind of talking about this, Commissioner Grant, at our last work meeting, right? Like, and that we might have some proposals for the group about how to build that into the schedule or prioritize that or have that as special meetings.
How would we do, I mean, now that we have these as open meetings, that's a good thing, but are you, I mean, you know, thanks for Kathleen and Jerry for being on, but I'd like more than two people, you know, how do
Yeah,
we do that? You know?
yeah,
So there is
frankly,
that, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I'll be going to the after some asks, I'll be going to the communications meeting that's coming up next week. And at that meeting, I'm really going to be pushing for us doing, we haven't really done any public communication about the commission yet, besides, you know, like some emails updating people and, you know, of course, public notices around the meetings, but we kind of haven't indicated what kind of input that we're looking for people or kind of how to engage. So I think it would be really great. Like people mentioned SLACO, neighborhood organizations, and some others. But to think about how we help people tell us what their priorities for the charter changes are before we finish deciding all the things, so that we don't have to kind of double that process.
Exactly.
And so, in my opinion, it would be good for that kind of solicitation of input, whether that's survey, whether that's also a public meeting for interest groups, community, business, government, anyone to kind of share those priorities, because then that could help us like divide them amongst the work groups too. And that doesn't mean, you know, in the future, our work group might want a special session, you know, about ENA or anything like that, but kind of we just need a starting point, really. And I think we
So,
kind of skipped that starting point.
so
Well,
for the ask,
I would love to have a public meeting before December, right? Like if we could have I mean, it's difficult with the holidays, but
yeah.
if we could have a
Mhm.
meeting in mid-December, mid-November, right? Public meeting, because once you get into December, you've got Hanukkah, that's early this year, and then the holidays. I just think people shut down, right? So if we want to maximize turnout, I think we've got to do it in mid-November.
Yeah. To
Um,
be fair, like as I said before, you may have a good 2 solid weeks in November, and then December you maybe have another 2 solid weeks. Before you know it, you're in January.
So, yeah, and here's the other thing too, just thinking through that. Like I'm not disagreeing with the sense of expeditiousness, but if if we're really going to and understanding that, you know, as a working group, we can also reach out and try to get some insight from, you know, different department heads. But it sounds like if the really thorough vetting is intended to happen at the December full charter commission meeting, then I guess I'm trying to think through, you know, making
What do you
sure
mean by
that,
vetting?
oh, not vetting, but just like hearing from the different departments,
I
you
see.
know, like, and like the full commission being able to ask questions and public in attendance being able to, you know, respond to what they're hearing. Um,
Something
trying to
also
think
to
through. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I was just saying also something to consider, because as we get into November into December, there are many people who have saved up all their vacation time, and this is the time where they're going to use it. So if we're going to reach out to people, we might want to do that sooner than later. So again, to Commissioner Grant's point, I mean, yes, that's I like, or as Casey has just said, you know, the need to be expeditious is there, but also at the same time, it's like, you know, some people have already begun putting in their vacation time. So
I guess the other thing that I was going with that too is I think that we do have a little bit of a responsibility to be able, when we're doing this public hearing, you know, to allow people to weigh in and share thoughts, to be able to share what we've learned. And, you know, it sounds like we do still have a lot of questions that could be informed by the different department heads. So, I mean, I guess in terms of like the multiple asks that we have, timeline changes, that ask seems to be give us the flexibility to have as many meetings as we want to, and also maybe push the first report date back. We talked a little bit about that earlier, you know, like in order, like it's It's our job to do a good job. It's our job to do a thorough job. It's not our job just to check a box and say, we did it. Look at these recommendations. And, I guess I'd be curious if, if there is a willingness at the full commission to let us play with that timeline a little bit and say, we understand the intent. Here's why it's not working for us. We would value having like maybe one more month so that we can really be sure that we're doing a good job before we fully report recommendations to the commission. What do you all think about that, commission? What that would look like would be, giving, allowing us to hear from different departments and then holding a widely advertised or widely shared public input session with our working group where we can explain to people in attendance, here's what we've learned. This is the topic. Here are the thoughts, just because it does feel like that's our duty a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really agree with the push 1 month back so that we can actually do this section justice. One thing I would add there is maybe we could get a little bit more structured in the timeline, because I think in the timeline right now, it's like between the different reporting dates, it's mostly just every work group just gives a presentation is kind of how it's written. And it might be good for us and more legible to the community if it was like running up to this first report date, the theme, not everything, is like around these ones. Then between that date and the second work group reporting, the theme is these set of articles. And I think that kind of structuring of the process helps the public engage in it more
Yes.
meaningfully, and we can actually communicate that. So that would be my additional suggestion on top of the moving a month back. And then the one other thing is, and I like always lean towards more community input at different stages being, that's just my bias. But I think
Is that the Ferguson in you there, Commissioner Dwight?
that's the Ferguson, and that's all that in me. That sometimes it can be good to get community input that helps us shape our questions, and then we're able to have the fullness of it. But I think community often appreciate when they've been engaged to shape the questions that then lead to the product versus just engaging on the product side. So that's my like inner little.
So David, what would you propose as a timeline for us, like gathering information, talking to department heads, speaking to the public? What are you thinking?
For like the general commission or like
For our work group?
I guess within the current structure, what we're supposed to report back, I don't have the timeline right in front of me. Is it?
Could I suggest something too? I mean, this is all going to be like notes are public record, right? So what if we threw together a Google document as like a working next step, like fully disclosing
Yes.
that in this hearing? We can throw together a Google Doc. We can inform the Charter Commission staff that we're going to be producing our report. And then as part of our report, we're going to include just sort of like the breakdown that we can pitch to the full Charter Commission members of, hey, here's the tangibles, here's what it would look like. Because Chris, I think to your point, one, I think that's good for our awareness, but I also think it's going to help the Charter Commission conceptualize what we're talking about a little bit more, to more fully weigh the merits of it. So maybe we can plan to put that together again with the full understanding that's a publicly available record. We'll make sure that the Charter Commission staff know about it, and then we can all maybe collaborate on that report over the coming week, and with the goal to have it ready for presentation by the full commission meeting next week.
Love it.
I really like that idea.
And then I think that's great. And the one part from your question, Chris, that is on the public input earlier, that could be as simple as like a structured survey, that goes out to a variety of groups that helps them prioritize a number of issues, which is the Ferguson Commission, before they split into their work groups that then dove into the different issue areas. They had a meeting that was a public forum, as well as a community survey that just gathered that input, and then that was funneled into the work groups as they were in their focus areas, just on the front end. So it doesn't mean, I agree with what Casey said, that it's not like we have to rush a big public meeting before the end of the year. Like maybe it could be January, it could be the beginning of next year. But I do think, I don't think we've had any welcome into the process for community at all.
And we need that.
Yeah.
Also, Casey, could you put together a sketch of the Google Doc and then start to circulate it?
Yeah. Very happy to do that for sure. I've been taking, the attorney in me has been taking very copious notes of our like intended next steps. So I think I've got a good framework to build off of. And yeah, I will, if it's not tonight, I'll get that out to you guys by tomorrow morning so you can see what we're working with. And then, yeah, do we want to set a tentative deadline of, okay, so our next meeting for the full commission is next Wednesday. Do we want to set a, maybe like a new Wednesday deadline of,
I
adding-
believe our next
oh,
one,
wait,
Casey, is the 16th of November.
let's see. Oh, that's right. I don't know why I was thinking it was, well, no, I have on my calendar, the next regular meeting of the full charter commission is Wednesday, November 1st.
No, I was talking about our work group was the 16th.
Oh, I'm so
Yes.
sorry. Got
Yeah.
it. So I was thinking in terms of, yeah, just getting our, using this as the report template for the full report for next Wednesday. So maybe we can plan on this document being first used for that purpose, and then have a noon deadline for like trying to get things finalized roughly for noon on Wednesday, the 1st. Does that work for people?
That'll work.
Okay.
Who wants to speak for our work group and do the presentation?
Not me. I'm muting myself.
I mean, I don't mind.
That means if we ask Casey, she can't say no.
I'm muting. No, I don't mind. If nobody else wants to
I
do it,
mean-
I'd be happy to make the pitch, but I don't want to usurp or anything, so.
I also don't mind it.
I just think it'd be good for us to have a primary person to.
Yeah,
So.
Be our
So
be
I
our
would-
voice, as it were.
we could rock, paper, scissors it right before the charter commission meeting next week if we really wanted to.
I
Or the
prefer rock.
last,
I prefer rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. You know, just to. But,
But also
you know,
tag team.
that's the Big Bang Theory in me, though. But
yeah. How about this? How about we see what the report's looking like and then we can circle
Yeah.
back. And I think part of this could just
Yes.
be you not knowing what it's going to say. And then once we have a better sense, we can just maybe touch in with each other and see, okay, has the spirit moved anybody to be the voice of the best subcommittee of the charter commission?
Mhm.
And yeah, we can just plan to check in next week with each other. Does that sound good?
that'll work.
Okay.
All right, it is 7:02.
All right. Thank you. And
Good.
Kathleen, thank you for hanging on for as long as you have. We really appreciate it. That's very cool.
Thanks for being here. And thanks for all that you're doing. And please do share that
Yes.
info as
Mhm.
you all get results and stuff.
Yep. All right. Bye, team.
Okay,
Later.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.